This is the My Campaign Coach podcast, where we talk about how to win elections. Every week, we let you hear straight from the best consultants, operatives, and candidates in the game, all for one reason, to help you win. For more information about how we can help you win, visit mycampaigncoach.com. Now, here's your host, Raj Schaefer.
Welcome to the How to Run for Office podcast from My Campaign Coach. Thank you to Campaign Sidekick for supporting our podcast. Visit campaignsidekick.vote to find out how their best-in-breed voter contact platform can revolutionize your campaign and help you win. Today we're doing kind of a special episode with two good friends of mine, Cole and Kaya Lyle. Both are a bit on the hairy side, but Kaya is clearly the more lovable of the two. At this point, it's probably important for me to note that Kaya is actually Cole's German Shepherd service dog. And through the work that she's done with Cole, members of Congress are already calling her the most powerful lobbyist on the Hill. Cole grew up here in Texas and served in the Marine Corps for 6 years, including a tour in Afghanistan after he graduated high school. Since getting out, he's completed an undergraduate degree from the Texas A&M University and actually has spent most of his free time lobbying to pass the PAWs Act and help his fellow veterans. I've got two primary reasons for having Cole and Kaya on today for this special episode. One, lobbying is an important part of political action, but it often gets a bad but well-deserved rap. It's important, though, because the cause championed and the means used determine the virtue of the enterprise, not the act of lobbying itself. Cole and Kaya provide a refreshing example of how citizens can exercise influence for good within the halls of Congress while keeping their souls in the process. And number two, supporting our military and veterans is one of my greatest passions, and I can't think of a better way to do that than to support the PAWs Act. Go to pawsact.com to sign the petition and keep listening to Cole and I to find out more about why this work is important. Cole, Kaya, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Well, we appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your busy lobbying schedule and everything that's keeping you busy up in D.C. to join us and talk about how citizens can be effective lobbyists and about the great work that you and Kaya are doing. Talk me through a little bit about your background. So before the Marine Corps and kind of going through that process, tell me about your growing up here in Texas and what eventually led you to become involved in politics.
Yeah, so it's an interesting story just because I grew up about an hour and a half south of Dallas. My family's ranch is near Corsicana. And I always grew up kind of with this sense of service. Like I knew I just wanted to serve in some capacity or the other. I can remember at a young age, I think every little boy at some point does this, but, tries to play soldier or something like that. And I just grew up kind of with that sense of I wanted to do something greater than myself. And I went to high school after my mom and my dad got divorced. I spent most of my time with my mom up in DFW at Colleyville Heritage High School. We lived in Euless, right near the DFW airport. I got involved in Boy Scouts really early at about 11 years old. Went on to get my Eagle Scout, joined the Marine Corps out of high school. I think I left less than 2 weeks after I graduated. And so I was in the Marine Corps, went to Afghanistan, and it was really at that point that I said, I saw the abject poverty that people in Afghanistan were living in, and I told myself that, I owed it not only to myself, but to my family and to the world to really pursue my education, because if there were people willing to literally die to get educated, that was a very powerful motivating factor for me. So I got back from Afghanistan. I tried to start going to school, but there were a few problems. I was actually married at the time. So I was going through a divorce. I lost my house. I didn't have a job. I wasn't currently in school. So I was having a really, really tough time, not only because of those reasons, but I was also dealing with some personal challenges in the form of post-traumatic stress. And so I had tried to utilize the VA system and taken pills, taken sleep aids, antidepressants in conjunction with going to counseling at what are called vet centers. They're kind of like outpatient VFWs that the VA funds. And none of that had really seemed to be working. And at the time, like I said, I was going through all those other challenges. So I decided one day cold turkey to quit and explore alternative methods of treatment. And I had a friend that had a service dog that worked wonders for him. So I started doing some investigating and basically saying, how can I acquire my own service dog? Most nonprofits had wait times over a year, sometimes a year and a half. Yeah.
That's a long time.
It is.
Especially to wait while you're either taking a lot of medication that you don't want to be on, or you've decided you don't want to take those, and you're dealing with the ramifications of that kind of post-traumatic stress.
Well, and these nonprofits are doing really admirable work, but it's just with the demand being as high as it is, because so many guys are suffering the negative effects of substance abuse from being overprescribed medications from the VA. I knew guys that were on cocktails of medications of like 12 or 14 different medications, because you take one, and then that one has side effects that you need to mitigate, so you take another to mitigate the side effects from that one, and then it's just like this snowball effect. So, the VA doesn't provide service dogs, and then these nonprofits are so backed up because they're on nonprofit-based budgets, and so I thought that was, kind of crappy that the VA didn't provide them. So I had to go out and basically spend $10,000 of my own money getting Kaya, getting her trained, getting all of her shots and everything. At the time, PAWs wasn't a thing, and while I was trying to get Kaya, I had also kind of sat down and reevaluated, like, long-term what I wanted to do. And when I sat down, I knew I wanted to serve. I had served in the military, as an Eagle Scout. I had always had a strong sense of service, and I wanted to continue that. And oftentimes that's why a lot of guys become cops, or they become firefighters, or they do something in public service when they get out, because they're looking for that sense of purpose. And so I sat down and I said, what do I want to do? And I said, as a former member of the military, as an instrument of foreign policy, I want to go into help shaping it one day. So I came up with joining foreign service and taking the foreign service exam, and long term, my goal was to be an ambassador to the United States to a foreign country. But I had no connections into politics. I wasn't in politics. I wasn't involved outside of just keeping up with issues and voting. I didn't really have anything in the political world to springboard me to kind of on that path. So I had one friend in politics, and her name was Ashley. And so I reached out to Ashley, and I said, this is what I want to do. Is there any way you could help me? And she was like, yeah, let's get you plugged into this, and this. And so
just real quick. So Ashley's a good mutual friend of ours, and it's how we met. And I just love that, first of all, that you sit down to plan out how you want to be active, and you're just like, yeah, I don't have any engagement in politics, but I'm going to figure out how I'm eventually going to be an ambassador, and we're going to make that happen. And that Ashley, knowing you well, was like, oh yeah, that's totally feasible. And by the way, we can help make that happen. And through all this, and this given my knowledge of you now, just like makes total sense that I can see that happening. But that this is a several-year-old thing that started with you sitting down and setting some goals, which is really awesome.
Yeah, no, and as you'll see, my expectations were, I never thought it would get as far as it did, but. So I sat down with Ashley, and she said, okay, let's do this. And at the time, she had been working for Senator Cruz, but she, at the time, was working on the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, his campaign for Attorney General. So she basically let me tag along to a lot of campaign events and more or less be like an advance man or a bodyguard for the future Attorney General of the state of Texas. So my first
and Cole is actually a really imposing bodyguard looking dude. He's got the Marine thing down. What are you, about 6'4", 6'5"?
6, yes, roughly.
Yeah. So he definitely fits the bill of a bodyguard and did a good job.
So the first political event I ever went to was Red State back in 2014, which is what Ashley took me to. And that's actually where I met Raz, where I met you. And so I go to Red State, and then that night we went to a dinner. Ashley took me to a dinner after the day, and he had spoken at Red State. The Attorney General had spoken at Red State. We went to a place in Colleyville called La Hacienda. So it was me, Ashley, the future Attorney General of Texas, Dana Lash from the Blaze Network, and her husband Chris, and their 2 kids. And that was my first day in politics. And so it was kind of a weird thing that, but it was great. And so I got to pick a lot of people's brains that day. And going forward, I just kept it up and started working with you and doing some block walking, and that was kind of the litmus test of politics is what I call it, because if you can't do stuff like that, then you know that you're not going to be able to kind of, that's, I don't know, I feel like that's the same thing as interning, in the sense that it's the crucible that you have to go through before you get to the fun part of politics. So,
and you came in, and as we got to know each other and struck up a quick friendship, pretty early on there, we started talking about what are your long-term goals, and how I want to be able to help with those as somebody you're working for and as a friend. And there's a question you find when you ask somebody that is that a lot of folks they have high goals, right? So becoming an ambassador, becoming a congressman, and so from that you say, okay, well, that's where you want to get.
Hold on. I don't know that I ever want to be a congressman. So.
Not you, but other people that I've worked with.
All
so
right.
I think you're way smarter than that.
Yeah.
But in a lot of cases, that folks have those high goals, but they're not willing to do the grunt work that it requires to show that you're trustworthy, to show you're hardworking. And it's I was very impressed early on. I got this guy that comes to me and says, I want to be an ambassador, and not only is he willing to want to do that someday, but he's willing to go out there and pound the pavement and knock on doors in the meantime to make that happen and make money and build that relationship. And that was a huge thing for me to see in you early on, was that tenacity. It was like, this is not just about the glory or getting on TV. I'm going to do the hard work, the non-sexy work as well. And that's how really I think you proved yourself to a lot of people, because it wasn't just me that you did that kind of stuff with.
Yeah. Well, I was actually, at the same time I was working for you, I was also working with Empower Texans and Ross Kessig in their DFW Metroplex Bureau as like an unpaid intern. And I was doing a lot of, computer grunt work for Ross, because, he does a lot of writing. He does a lot of, public speaking kind of stuff. And I was his background. I was his research. I was his, I did, all the grunt work behind the scenes. So it also this was a great way for me not only to get involved in politics, but to see a different level of politics than I'm on right now. So it was state and local level politics that I was getting involved in and kind of seeing how it worked. So it was good from that aspect. But while I was doing that, I also had applied to intern for Senator Cruz up in D.C. because I wanted to go to D.C. and kind of get that world too, and kind of learn how things up here work. So, with a couple of people's help, including you and Ashley, who had both previously worked for Senator Cruz, I was able to come up here in D.C. and do that. And I did. It was actually the semester that he announced that he was running for president was the semester that I was in his D.C. office.
So not much going on.
Right, yeah. So it was trial by fire, because not only were you in an office of a United States Senator, but you were in the office of a United States Senator that was running for president. So you can imagine all the calls that we got from in-state, from out of state, about every single issue that he took a public position on. And because these people, they don't, constituents don't understand that you have to keep the campaign and the legislative office completely separate. So you can't talk about campaign things when you're an intern in a senator's office, but they don't know that. So you kind of have to be very careful about how you say things, what you say. And it was a really interesting, another trial by fire. And what was awesome was, because I was an unpaid intern, some days I could, take the day off from the legislative side of the house. And because I was unpaid, it wasn't a conflict of ethics rules to go help out the campaign. So it was really easy for me to kind of, help out both. And so during CPAC of 2015, when he spoke, Kaya, quit it. Come here. Sorry, she was chewing on a bone. So in CPAC of 2015, I actually got to, I didn't work in the legislative office, and I went out to National Harbor to the Gaylord and worked with his body man, Bruce Redden, doing advance for him all day. So I got to see, for 1.5 days, I got to see the grinded out, grueling schedule of a presidential campaign, because he got up that day, I think it was like something stupid early, like 5 to do radio interviews and stuff like that. And then throughout the day, I think he shook over 1,300 hands and had 4 or 5 little mini fundraisers, and then 3 or 4 public speeches. And I remember by the end of the day, and this was one of the things I'll always remember, is I had a conversation with him, and he was just kind of talking to me, but you could tell he was absolutely exhausted. You know, he was doing the thing with his eyes where he was like barely keeping them open. And it was about 10 o'clock, and Turning Point USA was supposed to have him and Senator Rand Paul speak at an event at about 10 o'clock at night. And they had brought 2,000 or 3,000 energetic students, millennials out there that were ready to work and beat feet around the country to try to get these guys elected, because eventually both of them went on to run. So it was important that they show up, that they give a good speech, and that they kind of energize the youth, right? And Senator Cruz shows up, and like I said, he was exhausted. We were staged in the little back area, and I remember him and Bruce were sitting over there trying to get him some little snacks, food that they had left over in the back, just so he could get some energy. And he was so tired, but then he goes out there and without a teleprompter gives one of the best speeches that I've ever heard him give. I can remember, I mean, it was definitely the best of that day, but probably one of the best I've ever heard him give. And we get off the stage and we're taking him, the day's finally over for him, and we're taking him to his car. And I say, Senator, you know, like, I knew you were a smart guy, obviously, but I have a new appreciation just for your mental endurance to be able to just day after day, because it wasn't just that day. I mean, that was like most days on the presidential campaign. And
everyone.
And his response, and I'll never forget this, his response was, you know, Cole, you've had harder days than I have. I wasn't in the middle of a desert getting shot at by people who want to kill me.
Right.
And I was like, wow, I really respect and appreciate that answer, you know. But that was just kind of emblematic of who he was as a person. But anyway, so I got to do that. It kind of got a little sidetracked there, but interesting story.
Yeah.
Got a little sidetracked there, but that gave me the opportunity to see a lot in a very short time. I saw local level politics, I saw state level politics, I saw national politics, and even a presidential campaign, kind of behind the scenes, how it works a little bit. And it was at that point that Kaya was with me full time. And when I came back to DC to work for the Heritage Foundation that summer, Kaya was with me full time, and Senator Tillis from North Carolina stopped me on the street and started asking me about Kaya. And he said, what's up with the dog? Because a lot of people don't understand, because they don't see, you know, you're not blind, you don't have a major mobility physical issue. And so they're just kind of curious why you have a service dog. And so I told him and said that the VA doesn't provide funding for these dogs. And he said in probably less tactful terms than this, but he said, well, I think that's stupid. And I said, I agree. What are you going to do about it? Right. Because you're the policymaker. And so, you know, he comes back and he says, well, come to my office and we'll talk about it. And I go to his office, and keep in mind, again, at the time, I just hadn't really thought about really speaking with members of Congress to try to change this VA policy.
And this is all coming out of pretty much a random meeting with a senator, right?
Right, exactly. Random meeting on the street. It was actually, I remember the day that they were voting on the sunsetting of the Patriot Act in May 31st of 2015. And so they were there on a Sunday. It was actually a Sunday. And so he stopped me on a Sunday, did that. And so I show up to his office and we kind of talked through the policy. But what I really noticed was that, you know, I had the problem. I could tell him all about the problem, but I didn't really have a detailed proposed solution. And these guys have so many people that come to them with a problem and that just say, fix it. Right. But, and, you know, having worked in Senator Cruz's office, having worked in state and local politics, it's like, I mean, you can't even imagine the amount of suggestions these people get every single day to say, hey, there's a problem, you need to fix this. And people just assume that they have the right answers to be able to fix it because they're a member of Congress or they're a United States senator. So I really kind of said, but that meeting served as the impetus for me to say, well, if he's at least willing to listen to me, you know, other people could be willing to listen to me too. So I went back and not only created like a 2-page, basically a little white paper, a little memo outlining, hey, this is the problem, this is the status quo, this is 22 veterans a day committing suicide, this is a VA Senate committee study, that said that opiate abuse leads to a rise in veteran suicides, yada, yada, yada. I lined it out for him to basically say this is a huge issue that needs to be addressed. And then my solution was the VA doesn't, provide funding for these dogs. Let's do a pilot program, because largely the VA's objection to this was that there wasn't enough empirical evidence to back up the fact that service dogs help veterans with post-traumatic stress. There is a lot of emerging data, but just like a regulator will never say, we have enough regulations, a researcher is always going to say we need more research, right? So there always needs to be more research done, but there is a tons of not only anecdotal evidence that it works, but emerging empirical evidence from places like Purdue University and the Mayo Clinic that this does work. You see that there's a 75% reduction in one study, 75% reduction in suicidal ideation. There's over a 75% reduction in opiate dependencies. So it really, really does work.
Well, and really, it's important to note here that we're not just talking about there being a cost to acting as far as the research and stuff like that needs to be ongoing. There's a cost to not acting, right? And this, it's the tune of 22 veteran suicides a day right now.
Well, and interesting to note, actually, so the VA came out with a reduced number. Apparently, it's gone down to 20 veterans a day. So according to the VA, we're making progress. But the interesting thing to note about that study that the VA comes out with and that proposed number is that it actually it's not all 50 states. They don't do that survey with all 50 states. It's like 21 or 22 states. And they leave out key states like Texas that have a high veteran population.
Seriously?
And a high veteran suicide. Yeah. So,
Wow.
so the number tragically is probably higher than 22. Because they don't do a comprehensive kind of study of veteran suicide rates in all 50 states and the territories. So anyways, it was kind of, I had this report, I had this memo lined out saying we could do a pilot program where you could fund organizations that already do this, like Canines for Warriors in Florida, which is the largest organization that does it. Warrior Canine Connection, which is based in Maryland, about 45 minutes away from D.C. Patriot PAWs, based out of Rockwall, Texas, that does this all over the state. These organizations that already have the infrastructure and the expertise in place that are largely GuideStar rated charities that over, I think it's 75 or 80% of their funding goes directly to the training of the dogs, that goes directly to the veterans. So you're not running into kind of a wounded warrior situation where only 13% of their money goes directly to veterans. Yeah. These are all really highly rated charities, but a pilot program gives us a precedent, gives us a foot in the door. And we also mandated on the back end that you have a GAO study no more than 180 days after the completion of the pilot program to study the efficacy of these dogs, just so we can get more research and more empirical data to back it up once the pilot program expires and we can talk about reinstituting a larger program. So that was kind of what I did. And I finally got Congressman DeSantis out of Florida 6th. A friend of mine, it was kind of a friend of a friend thing through a friend of mine at the Heritage Foundation was his chief of staff was a friend of mine. So I met with his chief of staff, who said, I think this is a great idea. Let me get you a meeting with my legislative director, my legislative aide for military and veterans affairs. Sat down with them. They said, this is a great idea. I walked them through kind of what we wanted to accomplish, and they were the ones that came up with the pilot program idea. So the idea kind of was mine, but they took it and they kind of made it more they basically crafted it so where when they sent it to legislative council, it would come out. And the way they described it as, you can put certain ingredients in a cake, right? But you have to put them in a certain order in order for the cake to come out and look pretty, right? Correct. After it gets baked. So you need to put the right ingredients in the cake and the right level and the right time. And we had a bill in, I think, late January or early February of 2016.
So this is about a 9-month process from a random meeting with Senator Tillis, out there in March, all the way through the process of meeting with people and having crafted legislation 9 months later, which is at the same time a very short period of time for that kind of process, as well as it seems. I mean, it seems kind of like a long thing as well.
Well, so I mean, keep in mind that I didn't have any institutional support. Like, it was literally just me and Kaya walking around with a 2-page memo saying basically, this
Right.
is the issue.
There
And I
wasn't
was
an
fleshing out.
organization backing
Right.
you. There wasn't
Yeah.
a
I
budget
mean, I
behind
wasn't.
you or
I was
anything.
spending my own money. I got advice from a lot of different people, and by no means was this, was I creating all of these ideas and these initiatives by myself. But the legwork largely fell upon me to do it. And so,
And weren't you also going to college at this point?
no, well, I started school in August of 2015 again, back at Texas A&M. Well, I mean, I guess I was doing school even when I was living in DC. I was taking online classes, so yes, but I was physically in DC until August of 2016.
But you're interning full time. You're taking college classes, and you're lobbying on the side.
Right. Yeah.
It's not a small load of work.
No. So August of 2015, I was in DC, and then I went back to Texas to finish my degree at Texas A&M. But I was still doing this, so I was, taking flights back and forth from Texas to DC while I was in school full time. And actually, that semester I was taking like 18 hours, so it wasn't even a small school load, and I was missing 3 or 4 days of class at a time to come to DC and work on this. So it was interesting, but I somehow managed to get out alive. Anyways,
I think Kaya being pretty darn cute had something to do with that.
Right. Well, and that was the benefit, is that you get this idea and you get these, this solution in front of people, and it's hard for them to say no because the solution's right in front of their face, right?
Literally,
So whereas a lobbyist or something that's lobbying for, like a paid lobbyist that is a lawyer that comes to congressional offices that tries to convince you on the merits of something or on the political advantages of something, it was, I almost was in an advantageous position because I wasn't a paid registered lobbyist, because I had credibility in saying that this is a really, really awesome thing that you should invest in, not only because it's the right thing to do, and it's good public policy, and it's fiscally, like, we had to pay for it. It was fiscally conservative. It takes care of our veterans, but also, these guys are political animals. They want to know that what they're doing is going to be politically advantageous on some level as well. So you also package it in the sense that, this is good, not only public policy, but this is bipartisan. This, obviously is something Democrats oftentimes campaign on, reducing on drug reform and reducing dependence on opiates in the United States. Republicans oftentimes campaign on VA reform and on taking care of our veterans. I mean, Democrats do that too, but to a larger extent, Republicans play up the let's reform the VA. The VA is a broken system. Let's, do this. So, you package your pitch differently to different people, but in such a way that not only is it advantageous politically to them, but you can also you're in their face and you're saying this is a tangible thing that you can give veterans that will save lives, right? And Kaya is very fluffy and she's very cute, and I can recall a lot of times that I would walk in and, these guys have stressful jobs in and of themselves. They're meeting with constituents, they're meeting with, all sorts of interest groups, lobbyists, whatever. They're voting. They've got to worry about getting reelected. They've got to worry about, all sorts of things. They've got to manage their staff, and they're stressed out a lot of times. I bring Kaya in there, and I can't tell you how many members of Congress, senators, and representatives would just be like, "Hey, can I just cuddle with your dog for just a couple of minutes?"
I need somebody that's gonna be nice to me today.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I remember one, and I'm not going to mention her name, but I remember I had one congresswoman that said, almost started crying because I could just tell she was having just such a rough day, and she was like, you don't need to pitch me. I've already read the bill. I think we're 100% going to sign on. But can I get your dog up on the couch and just, cuddle with her for a few minutes?
Awesome.
And I was like, yeah, it's whatever. You do you. As long as you're gonna original co-sponsor my bill, I really don't care. So, and that's another aspect of it, because service dogs, are not technically allowed to be pet, by people that are other than their handlers. But it's a fine line because Kaya is trained to wake me up from nightmares and to stop anxiety attacks before they happen. She can sense certain stress patterns in my voice to remind me to calm down before I get too angry or depressed or whatever. So it's not hugely detrimental to her training if people in small groups pet her. But the problem is in public, large places, if one person pets her, everybody wants to pet her. So in kind of more intimate settings, like a meeting with a congressman, I don't mind if they pet her because, like I said, it's not that detrimental. And it's hard for me as a lobbyist to try to say, no, you can't pet my dog, but please sign on to my bill.
Right.
And that's a tricky conversation to have. So oftentimes I just kind of capitulate and say, all right, it's fine. You can do it, whatever. As long as you sign on to my bill, I don't really care because it's for the betterment of potentially tens of thousands of veterans. So if Kaya's training gets a little lax, that's a compromise that I can swallow. But anyway, so I remember there was another senator, a male senator, who, again, I'm not going to mention the name, but I walk in and you would have thought, I mean, he got on the ground with Kaya. It was just sitting there, big spooning her. And it was like, and it was, but all the staff came out and we're taking pictures, and it's a really interesting, unique way of convincing these people that this is something that works. So at last count, on the 114th, it died in the 114th, but we had 130 plus members of the House of Representatives, and I think 24 or 25 members of the Texas delegation signed on to the bill. And then we had, because the Senate version of the bill didn't get introduced until July or August, we only had 11 on the bill. But both of them were very bipartisan. On the House version, we had a lot of members of the Freedom Caucus, but we also had, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who openly primaried for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary. And in the Senate, we not only had Marco Rubio, but we had Tim Kaine, who Marco Rubio, obviously presidential candidate for Republicans, and Tim Kaine was Hillary Clinton's vice presidential candidate. So it was very, very bipartisan. And I think the issue and where we got hung up was just because the VA committees and by extension the VA, they said they didn't want to create a new benefit, right? That was potentially a bottomless hole, which is a ridiculous argument to make because, number one, this benefit sure would be an initial expensive cost up front. These dogs at economy of scale, I think it's roughly $22,000 per dog, all said and done with training, with getting the veteran out to the organization and flying them back and the follow-up, kind of everything. It's
right.
Roughly $22,000. But when you look long-term at the cost offset of getting these guys off of 75% of their medications that they're on for the rest of their life, you're talking about this 24-year-old that is potentially going to get medicated by the VA until he's, 70? I don't know what the average life expectancy of a male is, but medications are expensive. And you're talking about if you reduce those by 75% throughout his life by getting this guy a service dog that is, admittedly a high cost up front, telling me that it's not fiscally responsible because it would create a new benefit that potentially a lot of people would take advantage of is ludicrous. And further ludicrous because, there were things in place that we had written in the bill where it's not like every veteran was just going to come up and be like, hey, I want a dog, and they're going to get one. You have to have already tried evidence-based, treatment like pills or therapy and still be symptomatic. You have to be at least a 3 on the 1 to 5 scale of post-traumatic stress. There were some things in there that we had to where it would limit the people that would be able to obtain a dog. So it wasn't like this massive, new entitlement that we're trying to create. So it was just interesting. And actually, I look forward to working with, maybe not directly, but indirectly, Dr. Shulkin, who is getting his confirmation hearing to head the VA is actually today, to try to get him on board with this. Donald Trump has actually donated, I think, a little over $500,000 to organizations like Canines for Warriors that specifically do this kind of thing for veterans. So during the campaigns and after the campaigns, I've had people in the policy shop of Donald Trump and Mike Pence. And, to be fair, Hillary Clinton, her campaign reached out to me and said, hey, we want to put this in front of our policy guys. During the campaign, I kind of said I politely declined because I didn't want it to become a political football. But
smart move.
But after the campaign, when we have a clear victor, I've kind of said, yeah, let's go ahead and do this. And a good friend of mine is helping me out with getting this in front of the right people. So in the administration. So I think we're going to have administration support. I think we're going to have, support with different members of Congress. And I'm very confident that in the 115th Congress, there's not going to be a problem, and we'll get this done.
I love it. Well, and that's such an awesome story in my mind. One, just watching you and talking to you has gone through it, but this has been something you've done while you went and got a college degree, while you were interning. Much of your travel, I mean, what you didn't pay personally was friends and family and folks, supporters online, sending you Southwest rewards points to buy flights, helping you with hotel stays and
that's an important point because, I spent, it was probably $10,000 to $14,000 of my own money, because when we were talking earlier about that long period of time between May of 2015 and then January of 2016, that 9-month period of time, or however many months that was, 7-month period of time, there was no media because the bill hadn't been introduced yet. There was no media. There was really no public awareness of this and kind of me doing it. So I spent a lot of my own money during that period of time. Once the bill was introduced and people, the public became aware, and a lot of friends on Facebook became aware of, they saw a video from Independent Journal Review, or they saw a video from, Now This Politics or whatever that had me in it. They were like, oh my gosh, that's Cole. Like, what is he doing? And so they were like, oh, how can I help? And it was really at that point that a lot of people that weren't, close friends, immediate family that had already known what I was doing said, hey, how can I help? And I would say, oh, well, you can buy me a flight if you want, because flights are expensive. And oftentimes, if a senator or a congressman said, hey, I really want to meet with you on this day, this is the only time I have, can you be in DC? And that'd be 2 or 3 days out. Last minute flights are expensive. And but it was one of those things that I couldn't ever really feel super not guilty is not the right word, but I couldn't feel bad about having to spend that, because if long term you look at this and you think that potentially tens of thousands of veterans, not only of Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, the Gulf War, would benefit from this, but veterans of future conflicts would have this other avenue in which to kind of help with post-traumatic stress, with TBI, with mental health issues, and save a lot of lives. This could potentially impact hundreds of thousands. So why am I going to bitch about, maybe, a couple of $1,000s in potentially helping this? So this.
Well, and momentum is such an important part of that legislative process, right? Well, as you built that, just like in a military campaign, you can't stop. If you let up on it at all, then it's gonna winnow on the vine, and you had to keep that pressure up throughout Congress.
Right. Yeah. So, but my friends and family, once they figured out what I was doing, they were supportive. But it's important to note for anybody that might be interested in doing some sort of citizen lobbying, you're going to spend some of your own money. Even if it's a good idea, and I think I had possibly the most sellable idea in the history of ideas for Congress. You're still going to spend a little bit of your own money to try to get this done on flights, on transportation, on food. Opportunity cost. When I wasn't in Texas, I couldn't work, so I didn't. I wasn't making. Not only was I spending money to go to DC, but I wasn't making money because I couldn't work. So there was a lot of personal struggle in terms of finances, but long term it'll pay off, and I can't complain, like I said, when it'll benefit potentially tens of thousands of people. So.
What are some of the things you've learned? I mean, as far as applying this on a little bit broader scale to folks that are interested in citizen lobbying themselves, what are some of the things you've learned through interacting with so many of these very powerful, important people and their staffs? What advice do you have for folks that are interested in some kind of similar effort? I
could write a book about this, and I actually am at the beginning stages of doing so. But so the first thing I would say is that these guys are humans, like they're people. Elected officials, they're not, a lot of people, they see people like Paul Ryan, who I've met on TV all the time, and they kind of put him on this pedestal like he's some sort of, you know, I can't even describe it, because it's just, people get starstruck when they see Paul Ryan, or they see Ted Cruz, or they see, anybody that has a very high public profile, Bernie Sanders. And you got to understand that when you get these people kind of behind closed doors, when you get them when the cameras aren't on, they're real human people that most of them, even if you disagree with them politically, they wouldn't have been able to advance in public policy without having convinced a lot of people to vote for them. So they're going to be charismatic. They're going to be relatively nice people, unless you're telling them something they don't want to hear. And so they're humans, right? So, you want to give them proper respect and deference for their position and kind of their, rank, for lack of a better term, as a United States congressman or senator. But at the same time, don't fear them because you think they're these all-powerful kind of people that can wave a magic wand and destroy your life. Because House of Cards, although a compelling drama, I haven't seen a lot of that really in D.C., and I've been kind of in the weeds and in the thick of it for a while. I mean, there is definitely some politicking and some deals made behind closed doors and stuff like that, but it's so that's number one. I guess I'll just leave it at that. And then the second thing would be, when you're dealing with staffers, a lot of times, Winston Churchill said the greatest argument against democracy is 5 minutes with the average voter, right? And anybody that's interned on the Hill and has had to answer constituent phone calls for a week can tell you that it is mentally draining, because people, they talk to you like you're some subhuman piece of garbage because you work in Congress. And I've had people threaten to kill me. I've had people, just be the nastiest that they've ever been. And it's because they can't see you. They don't know you. So they feel emboldened to kind of, be that way. And so just kind of along the same lines of don't fear the congressmen and the senators, but like treat staff members with respect. Like, you're never ever going to win an argument, and you're never going to win a policy discussion or convince people of the worthiness of your cause if you're making personal attacks, if you're nasty. And oftentimes many of these people are working on the Hill out of a sense of duty, because they're not getting paid hardly anything. I mean, comparatively,
Right.
the cost of living in D.C. is astronomical, and these people are trying to cut it on $35,000, $40,000 a year, which in Texas gets us a lot, right? I mean, that's actually a pretty decent little starting salary. But in D.C., you got to think rent's probably going to be $1,200 a month. So for 12 months, it's going to be almost 16 grand. So their take-home pay plus taxes in D.C. are astronomical. I know I'm going out on a limb here, but my point is,
it's important.
My point is that it's not like these people are coming up here to make money and to I don't know. It's just, I feel like there's such a perception of people that work in D.C. as this greedy group of people, and they're showing up largely at 6:30, 7 a.m. in the morning, and they stay until 6 or oftentimes 7 at night, working really hard. And oftentimes they deal with constituents that kind of are trying to say, hey, this is not okay, or hey, I want you to support this, but they're very just nasty and mean about it. So,
and that happens whether you're talking about on a constituent phone call or staff in person. And having both interned in D.C. and worked for Senator Cruz, man, it always boggles my mind. It's like, you want to get somebody to take your opinion seriously? Well, then don't be a jackass, because it's the intern that you're cussing at that's going to write down on a sheet of paper and input into a database what you said and whether it was, whether it should be taken seriously or not. And it's my job as the staffer that when you leave the room, the senator turns to me and says, "Hey, so what did you think?" Well, when the first things out of my mouth are, "Well, the guy's kind of an asshole," that's probably not going to help your case. So be nice. Just common human decency is critical.
Well, and the staff largely exists. The member's very busy. And I got the line all the time that, I pay your salary, so you have to whatever. Well, number one, I was an unpaid intern, so you really don't pay my salary. But
Joke's on you.
Even if I was a staffer, I get paid, by the government to staff out this. The member, you pay the member's salary, and I work for the member, right? So My job as a staff member is to kind of appropriately prioritize, his day, what he needs to do, and juggle all these different priorities that he has, and be that first line of defense for people that call, that want to take meetings, but maybe don't have that idea. Like I didn't have an idea to fix the solution appropriately fleshed out. So I'm the first line of defense to kind of say, you have a problem, but do you have a solution that I can put in front of my boss? Because, you kind of weed out the people that maybe don't have a complete idea, that maybe are not the nicest people, and you don't want them to put in front of your boss because they just want to make noise and they want to protest or they want to yell and scream. So my third piece of advice would be, if you have an idea, make sure that it is well formulated, it's well thought out, you have a policy proposal, you know what you're talking about, and that you can have a conversation with a staff member that can prove that you know what you're talking about, and that your solution is something that will be advantageous to that member of Congress. So that would be the third thing. And I'm sure I've got 10,000 other pieces of advice, but I don't want to take up all your time on your podcast.
We don't want to have you basically read your book out for free. We want to come have to buy your book eventually as well.
Yeah. So.
Well, that is fantastic. Well, I'm really proud of you as a friend and for seeing what you got to do over these last couple of years. It's going to be exciting to hopefully see with the new VA, secretary and everything. Hopefully that you'll win some friends over there and be able to get some good stuff done. And I'm stoked to see this thing get passed here and to see you behind the president while this thing gets signed here later this year.
Well, I don't actually. So I definitely appreciate that. But it's so if one of the things I'd be remiss if I didn't say going forward, if somebody does want to help with this effort and with the PAWs Act or anything, there actually has been an association of service dog providers for military veterans that's been formulated of things like Canines for Warriors, of organizations that, like I said, have created an association so they can, your listeners and viewers can go to Service Dogs 4, and that's the number 4, not the word spelled out, 4vets.org. And again, that is servicedog4vets.org. And that is something that you can donate, you can kind of read up, but that is kind of who I am going to be long-term passing the torch to. Obviously, I'm still going to be trying to help PAWs pass, but I also, because I haven't been getting paid and I've been spending a lot of my own money, I am looking at full-time jobs myself to finally get a job. And so I've been interviewing here recently with a lot of different organizations, a lot of different veteran service organizations, members of Congress. So I may not be long-term within the next year or 2 years still working on PAWs, because once the bill passes, then the next steps is going to be largely up to the organizations that provide these dogs for veterans. So, so that association is going to be the lead on the next step once PAWs passes. And like I said, your listeners can go to that website and kind of check it out.
And that's servicedogs4vets.org.
Yes, service dogs, plural, 4vets.org.
And we will have the link to that in the show notes. I would also note that if you spell the 4 out, you get a different website, different group. So make sure it's the numeral 4, servicedogs4vets.org.
Right. Yep. So that is in a nutshell, in an hour-long nutshell. That's kind of where I'm from, what I'm doing, and what we're looking to accomplish, and maybe how people, hopefully people have gotten some good tips and good advice, and if they want to tackle an issue themselves. So.
I like it. Well, Cole, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, and Kaya as well. We appreciate it. I think she's been busy chewing some bones and hanging out there while we're talking. So I'm glad that you could pass on all the wisdom from her side of things. We really appreciate you being on. Guys, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. It's an important subject for me. I hope you got to learn some good things about being a citizen lobbyist in D.C., and I hope you'll check out all the different websites we put, from pawsact.com to the servicedogs4veterans.org. Check out those links and help these organizations get this thing passed. It'll make a difference in thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of veterans' lives across the country. So God bless you guys. Take care and check out the show notes for more information. We'll catch you guys again next week.
Please subscribe and rate us on iTunes to help spread the word. We'll be back with you next week with more campaign insights from my campaign coach.